please join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London, where you'll find content probably unavailable elsewhere. We're friendly and you'll be made very welcome. But keep it quiet, just between me and you, okay?
Bottle after bottle of Gordon's gin poured continuously down Reggie Kray's throat. Medicine, if you like, gulped down in a fruitless attempt to help him handle what had happened. There were also handfuls of Valium taken with the gin in a pointless attempt to calm himself down. A tidal wave of intoxication, night after night, anything to alleviate the pain and crush the truth, which he couldn't acknowledge, of his own responsibility for Francis's downfall. He'd always been the rational twin, yet now there seemed no reason at all in his behavior. Consequently, there were two madmen giving orders to the men in the firm, drawing up hate lists, behaving unpredictably. Very soon Reggie looked haggard and drawn, haunted. Just a week after Francis's funeral, now virtually consumed by paranoia, Reggie Kray decided it was time to get out there and wreak revenge on the Shay family. He'd start, he thundered, with Frankie Shay. The row over the unpaid debt of £1,000 that Frankie had lent Reggie still rankled. He'd sought him out once and for all. He dispatched one of the men around him, Tony Lambriana, to drive him to a pub in Hoxton where he knew Frankie drank regularly. He had a gun on him and I realized he was thinking about shooting Frankie Shay, recalled Lambriana, in his book, Inside the Firm. Tony Lambriana said he found himself in a difficult position, having known Frankie since childhood. I understood his feelings, especially since other people were putting a lot of poison in, sticking up Francis's name while knowing it was a sore point. At the same time I saw the other side of it all and I could never have harmed Frankie Shay, could never have seen him shot, said Lambriana. Inside the pub, Frankie was drinking with his mates, unaware of how close he was to Reggie's paranoid rage and the gun. Tony Lambriana parked the car opposite the pub and started talking to Reggie, hoping he could get him to see reason. In my heart of hearts, I was almost certain that Reggie could not have hurt Frankie, he wrote. If he'd come face to face with him, he'd have been more likely to break down, because every time he saw him, he saw Francis, or maybe he might even have given him a few quid rather than do anything to him. But when Reggie was in a funny mood, you could never be completely sure. I said to him, "Look Reggie, you don't mean it. Come on." And as we talked, I knew that the moment of danger had passed. Reggie calmed down, he was rational again. On another occasion not long after Francis's death, Tony Lambriana wrote that he ran into Frankie Shay in a West End club. He said, "Am I all right? I know you and Chris are very strong with the twins now." I said, "Frank, we go back a long way and I'd never do anything to harm you. I'd be insulted if you thought I would." Kray minder and enforcer Ronnie Hart saw the state Reggie was in at very close range. He'd been living alongside it right from the time Francis died. Hart was the twins' cousin, a blonde, good-looking, former merchant Navy sailor. He'd relished being part of the firm, had opted to get involved with it for kicks, for the sheer thrill of living dangerously. Ronnie Hart, in fact, played a key role in the twins' downfall. Yet in those weeks immediately after Francis's death, he went everywhere with Reggie as his driver. He'd been with Reggie when he'd gone to the mortuary to identify her body, and after the funeral he would drive Reggie each week out to the suburbs to the cemetery at Chingford Mount. The minds of the twins were, of course, completely warped and inhuman, said Hart in 1969. In his peculiar way, he was devoted to Frances, and he was convinced, probably because of his ego, that she really loved him, and that after she left him, she only stayed away at the instigation of her parents. On every trip to the cemetery, Reggie would sob. He spent £20 on fresh flowers for the grave every Saturday. He became so upset he was incapable of changing the flowers he'd bring. I had to do the job. All he could do was kneel in front of the grave and cry. He bought a windmill that stood about 3 feet high, a working model made in a plastic material which looked like stone. He said, "This will do until I get the headstone made." The headstone was to be made in Italy from Italian marble. The expensive, specially made headstone bearing the name Frances Elsie Kray was to be a permanent reminder for the Shays of Reggie's complete rejection of their wishes, a visible affront to Frances's memory and, even more painfully, a denial of what had been her own wish to be buried as Frances Shay. On the anniversary of Frances's 24th birthday, the 23rd of September 1967, Hart drove Reggie to the graveside. This time, they were accompanied by Violet and her sister May. Elsie and Frank Sr. were already there. Mr. and Mrs. Shay put 2 black vases down, one on either side of the grave, and on each was a label. One read, "To my beloved sister, from Frank, for your birthday," and the other read, "To our darling daughter, remembering you on your birthday," recalled Hart. While the parents were putting flowers on the grave, we all stood back by our car. Mrs. Shay broke down and cried. She came across to Reggie and spat at him. She said, "You killed my daughter, you bastard, and if you spend £1,000 a week on flowers it won't do any good because we will never forgive you and neither will she." Then they walked away. At the time, Reggie said nothing. The following Saturday, I took him to the cemetery. He pulled the flowers out of the pots Frances's parents had left and savagely screwed them up in his hands. "I don't want their stinking flowers on my wife's grave," he said. "I would love to have choked her last week when she said that to me, but I daren't because of Frances." He then moved the 2 pots into bushes where they could not be seen, concluded Hart. When she died, it was like the world had come to an end, remembered Rita Smith. "We didn't know what to do. He looked absolutely terrible. One of his mates said, 'He's worrying me, Reet. He's drinking himself silly. He doesn't care if he lives or dies.'" Throughout the East End, the story of Frances and how she died was an endless topic of speculation. Some believed it wasn't suicide at all. Ronnie had murdered her, they claimed, forced the pills down her throat, though there was no foundation in this whatsoever, since Ron remained in hiding at that time. Others claimed the twins had done her in themselves, hatched a plot between them to kill her because she was threatening to go to the police. Most people, however, knew that Elsie and Frank believed Reggie, and Reggie alone carried much of the responsibility for Frances's self-destruction. All these stories, of course, eventually found their way back to Reggie, which made him even more deranged. After she died, we all thought it would send Reggie over the edge, recalled Maureen Flanagan. Their brother Charlie always said that people kept telling him in pubs that Reggie had scared this young, beautiful girl out of her life with his lifestyle. Tormented, drunk nearly all the time, and more under the influence of his twin than at any time before, Reggie now started to take out his rage, his anger, on virtually any random target. Ronnie, who came out of hiding that July, merely added fuel to the fire. He didn't stop reminding Reggie that he hadn't yet done what he'd done that night in the Blind Beggar pub. By now, Reggie was teetering on the edge of a breakdown. Ron, helpful as ever, told him a man called Frederick, a small-time criminal, had been rude about Francis. That was it. Reggie went round to the man's house and shot him in the leg. He knifed another man for some half-imagined slight. Both men survived their attacks. Neither took their grievances to the law, of course. Eventually, Reggie had recovered somewhat from his tormented grief and found a new girlfriend, a 23-year-old called Carol Thompson. Chris Lambriana described Carol as very pretty, a nice ordinary girl, nothing flashy, just a decent girl. According to John Pearson in his book, The Cult of Violence, in the weeks before the police net closed in on the twins, Carol had briefly confided in him about her relationship with Reggie. Just like Francis, she found the endless drinking and the fact they were never alone very difficult to handle. She told Pearson she and Reggie were having bitter arguments just as he had had with Francis. Carol told me he was often on the edge of violence, recalled Pearson. She said, so I used to tell him, hit me if you want to, show me what a brave man you are. But of course he never hit me. It was less than a year since Francis had died. By taking up with Carol, who briefly tried living with him but finally gave up, it seems Reggie was still pursuing the same impossible dream of a normal life away from the nightmare world of betrayal and lifetime imprisonment he was now facing. At precisely 6 a.m., on the morning of the 8th of May 1968, Nipper Reed's team of detectives finally pounced. One group, headed by Reed, arrested the twins at 12 Braithwaite House. Others went to the homes of the leading players in the firm to arrest them in a meticulously planned operation. They found Reggie in bed in the flat with a girl called June. Ron was in the next room with a young man. No resistance was made at all when Nipper Reed, their number one enemy, finally slipped the handcuffs on the pair. Ron is reported to have said, "All right, Mr. Reed. I'll come quietly. But I've got to have my pills." The news of the Krays' arrest galvanized everyone. Could this really mean the end of their reign? Would they go down for a long stretch? After all, they'd been arrested before and wound up triumphant. At 95 Geffrey Street, just a stone's throw from their former home in Ormsby Street, now scheduled for demolition, the news of the twins' arrest reached Elsie and Frank that same day. The couple were doing their best to adjust to life in their newly built two-bedroom flat, recently allocated to them by the local authority, a home with all the conveniences they'd lacked for so long. Hearing about the Krays' arrest seemed to come right out of the blue. Even the East End rumour mill hadn't known very much about the details of Reed's top-secret operation to bring the twins down once and for all. And Elsie Shea didn't waste a minute. She'd been praying for this day for a long time. Without even considering the eventual outcome of the news, Elsie decided it was time she made that phone call. She rang the superintendent's office at Chingford Mount Cemetery. Could they please tell her what the procedure was for having her daughter's remains removed from her grave at Chingford Mount to a resting place elsewhere? Did she have to fill in a form? Fine. Could they please send it to her as soon as possible? They'll never get off this time, she told her husband. They've got to let us do it, but of course, as we now all know, they didn't.
If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.